I had just been promoted and was driving home. The steering wheel was warm under my palms and a light, fizzy elation bubbled in my chest. Lead Strategic Planning Analyst. It sounded solid, weighty, like a long-awaited note in the symphony of my life. Plans were already forming in my head. A meeting with the board tomorrow morning, a dinner at that expensive restaurant with a city view on Friday to celebrate with Mark. I looked at the lights of the evening metropolis flowing past the window and felt like the captain of a ship that had finally set the right course. My phone, lying on the passenger seat, kept lighting up with congratulatory messages. I smiled. Everything was right. Everything was going according to plan. The traffic light at the intersection of Victory Avenue and Garden Street blinked yellow. I was on the main road. The green was still far ahead for me. I accelerated to make it through. That moment is forever imprinted in my memory like a frame from a bad movie. A sharp, soul-wrenching screech of brakes from the left, a dark blue blur of a delivery van emerging from the blind spot, and a blinding headlight growing in the windshield at an incredible speed. There wasn't even time to be scared. Just a thought, short and utterly meaningless. This shouldn't be happening. Then, impact. Not a sound, but an impact of cosmic force, slamming me into the seat and then throwing me out of it. The crunch of metal, the ringing of shattering glass, and the world turned over, spun in a furious carousel. My head hit the side pillar. A deafening silence rang in my ears, and black and orange spots swam before my eyes. I didn't lose consciousness. I felt everything. A sharp, burning pain in my left side, as if a red-hot rod had been driven in there. The stiffness in my neck, a warm trickle crawling down my temple. I saw the skewed ceiling of my car and the cracked side window through which cold night air poured. Somewhere far away, as if from another dimension, came voices, car horns. It smelled of gasoline, dust, and something sweetly metallic. My blood. Then, vague fragments, flashing blue lights, faces in orange vests leaning over me, their hands careful and firm, talk of cervical spine immobilization, sharp pain as they pulled me out through the mangled door, the cold asphalt under my back, the ceiling of the ambulance finely trembling on the bumps, and the steady sound of the monitor. I tried to wiggle my toes. It seemed to work. It was a small, pathetic victory. Then, the bright light of the emergency room, slamming doors, voices overlapping, pressure dropping, prep the OR. Has the family been called? They cut off my favorite beige blazer, bought for important meetings. I felt sorry for the blazer. Then, a mask over my face, a chill in the vein, and a plunge into an abyss devoid of dreams and pain. I woke up in a private room. The first thing I felt was not pain, but a complete, absolute detachment from the world. I lay there, packed in plaster and bandages, tethered to IVs, unable to move anything but the fingers of my right hand and my eyelids. My body was a heavy, alien, disobedient sack of bones. The pain came later, a dull, aching, all-pervasive background symphony in which solo parts of sharp, cutting suffering in my side and leg would periodically soar. The diagnoses rained down on me like hail. A closed comminuted fracture of the femur with displacement, 3 broken ribs, a lung contusion, a concussion, multiple hematomas and abrasions. My framework, my well-oiled body, which I had grown so accustomed to relying on, had betrayed me. It had become a source of torment and a prison. Mark came the next day. His face was gray with fatigue and a sleepless night. He took my helpless hand, and his fingers trembled. "It's going to be okay, Anya," he said, and his voice broke. "The main thing is, you're alive. Everything else is nonsense." I wanted to say it wasn't nonsense, that I had a meeting tomorrow, that I couldn't just drop out of life like that. But only a wheeze escaped my throat. I saw in his eyes not only fear and pity, but a shadow of something else, the shadow of a man looking at a problem, a burden. At the time, I chalked it up to stress. The days in the hospital merged into one endless, monotonous canvas woven from pain, humiliation, and boredom. I was fed, turned over, had my temperature taken, catheters changed. I was an object, a complex case, a medication schedule. My personality, my recent promotion, my plans, all dissolved in the sterile hospital smell. I was dependent on strangers for the most basic things. That broke me more than the fractures. A week later, my new boss, Viktor Sergeyevich, came. He brought a huge basket of fruit and expensive cognac, which I couldn't have anywhere near me now. He stood by the bed, awkward and alien in this kingdom of suffering, and said the right words. "Don't worry. Your position is waiting for you. Get well. The team misses you." But his eyes slid over the cast, the IVs, and in them I read a cold, businesslike calculation. How many months would I be out? Who would do my work? How effective would I be when I returned? He stayed for 10 minutes and left, leaving behind not relief, but a heavy foreboding. And then rehabilitation began. It was hell, stretched out over time. The physiotherapist, a stern woman with the hands of a strong man, came every day and made me do unimaginable things. Wiggle the toes of a foot that was one solid, painful lump. Tense my thigh muscles so they wouldn't atrophy under the cast. Later, when the cast was off, bend my knee a millimeter. Every millimeter came at the cost of sweat, tears, and a quiet, suppressed whimper. I hated her for that ruthless kindness. But it was she, not the sympathetic looks of my family, who was bringing me back to life, in tiny steps. Mark came less and less often, first every other day, then once every 3 days, then only on weekends. Conversations became shorter, more awkward. He talked about work, about how he had replaced me on an important project, and there was a strange, unfamiliar confidence, even pride in his voice. I lay there and listened, feeling a wall growing between us, made of plaster, pain, and the chasm of our new, unequal experience. He lived in a world of speed, decisions, the future. I lived in a world of pain, the struggle to simply go to the toilet, and the fear of a wheelchair. One day, 2 months later, when I could already sit up with difficulty and even stand a little with a walker, he came and didn't sit on the usual chair by the bed. He stood, shifting from foot to foot. "Anya, we need to talk." My heart sank into an icy void. I knew what he was going to say. I had seen it in his evasive gaze for the past 2 weeks. "I can't handle it," he said quietly. "I want to be with you, to support you, but I can't watch you suffer. It's killing me. And I met someone else. Nothing happened, I swear, but it's easy with her. She's not broken." The word broken hung in the air like a slap. I was broken. Not just my bones, all of me. My career, my relationship, my confidence in tomorrow. Everything lay in fragments, like the body of my car in a junkyard. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. Only emptiness, vast and silent. "Okay," I whispered. "Go." He left. And with his departure, the last bastion of my old world collapsed. Now I had nothing, only a broken body and a long, agonizing road back into the unknown. I was discharged as a fragile, frightened creature on crutches. The apartment, once so cozy and filled with mine and Mark's things, seemed huge, frightening, and empty. He had taken his things. Traces remained, an empty spot on the bathroom shelf, a bald patch in the closet. I was alone, completely alone. The first days at home were worse than in the hospital. There was at least some system, a routine, people. Here, there was silence, interrupted only by the creak of my crutches on the parquet and intrusive thoughts. I was afraid of falling in the shower, afraid of not being able to carry a cup of tea, afraid of a call from the office where I had probably already been written off. Fear paralyzed me more than the injuries. But there was no choice. Either give up and let this emptiness consume me, or move, even by a millimeter. I started small, not just doing the exercises from the hospital, but adding my own. Every day I tried to do one more movement, stand on crutches for 5 minutes longer, walk not to the kitchen, but to the window in the living room, make myself the simplest breakfast, These were incredible, titanic efforts. After each such feat, I would collapse on the sofa and cry from helplessness and pain. But I did it again. A month later, I ventured outside. The descent from the 5th floor without an elevator, it happened to be broken, was like climbing Everest. I went out into the yard, sat on a bench, and just watched the children playing, the old ladies feeding pigeons. The world lived its life, bright, noisy, paying no attention to me. And there was a kind of liberation in that. I was not the center of a universe that had crashed, but simply its small, damaged, but living part. That day, I bought an ice cream from the stall by the entrance, a trivial popsicle on a stick. I ate it, sitting on the same bench, and cried. But these were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of something else, a fragile, barely perceptible joy simply from being able to do it, by myself. I called the office and arranged a meeting with Viktor Sergeyevich. The meeting was brief. He was polite but cold. My position, of course, was filled. They offered me to return, but to a junior analyst position with a lower salary and, more importantly, the loss of all my projects. To ease back in, he said. It's understandable that after such an injury you need time to adapt. His tone made it clear that adaptation was a polite synonym for disability. I thanked him and said I'd think about it. And I thought. Sitting in my quiet apartment, looking at the city lights that once seemed to me a symbol of my success and now were just a beautiful view, I thought about how the race I had been in no longer made sense, that I had fallen out of it on a sharp turn and now saw it from the outside, saw how meaningless and exhausting it was. I no longer wanted to prove that I wasn't broken. I wanted to find what would have meaning for me, here and now, with my crutches and my new, inconvenient reality. And I started writing. At first, I just poured all my pain, anger, fear into a text file. Then I began to describe the hospital, the face of the physiotherapist, the emptiness in the apartment, the taste of that ice cream in the yard. I wrote about how the body that betrays you becomes your main teacher, how pain forces you to discard everything superficial and see the essence, how loneliness can be not a prison, but a workshop where you reassemble yourself piece by piece. I created an anonymous blog, called it Notes from Crutches, without pathos, without self-pity, just honestly and without embellishment. I wrote about the everyday life of rehabilitation, about silly everyday problems, about moments of small victories. Unexpectedly for me, the blog began to find a response. Comments came from others like me, broken, physically or morally. People thanked me for my honesty, shared their stories, supported each other. I, who felt like an outcast, suddenly found myself part of an invisible community of strong, fragile, struggling people. It gave me more strength than any praise from a boss. A year passed. The crutches gave way to a cane, and then it too went into the corner. A limp remained, a slight, almost graceful reminder, but I was no longer ashamed of it. It was my scar, my story, carved into my body. I didn't return to the office for that reduced position. My Notes from Crutches turned into a book, modest but published. I started getting invited to small meetings, to rehabilitation centers, just to talk. I didn't become a motivational speaker. I can't stand that pompous lie. I just told the truth, that breaking is painful and scary, that after a blow, life doesn't return to normal. It becomes different. And in this different life, you can also find your place, your light, even if not as dazzling as before. I rented a small studio apartment with large windows. I work as a freelancer, write articles, and run consultations for people experiencing crisis after trauma. I earn less than a lead analyst, but every ruble is mine, hard-earned and honest. I have new friends, not from the world of glossy success, but from the world of real feelings and mutual support. Among them are the nurse from the hospital who once washed me, and a guy programmer who also survived an accident and found my blog. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I look at the scar on my thigh, intricate and rough. I remember that girl in the beige blazer who was dashingly speeding down Victory Avenue, confident that she held her destiny in her hands. She seems incredibly distant and frivolous to me now. She didn't know what life is really made of. She didn't know the price of simple things, the ability to take a step without pain, to drink a cup of hot tea while watching the rain outside the window, to feel tired after good, honest work. I had just been promoted and was driving home. I got into an accident, and after that I ended up in the hospital, after which my whole life changed. It didn't just change, it was reborn. Like a forest reborn after a fire. First a black, lifeless wasteland, and then the first fragile shoots of a new, different life, more resistant to fire, sinking its roots deeper. I lost my career, my loved one, the illusion of control. But I found myself, the real one, broken, darned, with scars inside and out, but alive. And in this new life, quiet and unassuming, there was more real meaning than in all that glittering race that remained on the other side of that fateful intersection.